Good day, everyone. I was about to say good evening, but we might have people not in the United States. So it could be good morning, good evening, just good afternoon. I want to welcome you to our Los Angeles Data Platform user group. Thank you all for joining us today. We value your participation and feedback. Please mute your phone if you're connecting with the phone. If you're not familiar with Los Angeles Data Platform, we are a user group running every third Wednesday of every month. We're all virtual, so you can join us at any point. And looks like I need to start streaming on Facebook. Okay, perfect. I think this is all streaming now to Facebook. If you still don't know how to join us on Eventbrite or Meetup, again, every third Wednesday of every month, we are Pacific Standard Time. So if you need to adjust your time, please do so. You can follow us on different social media. It's basically LA Data Platform, or you can go for Linktree and see any other social media accounts that are not listed on this list. Please feel free to join our mailing list so you get more content from us other than sessions. Or basically, you'll get something between the sessions. We are raffling a t-shirt every user group meeting, so you can scan the QR code, fill out the details, and at the end of this meeting, we're going to be raffling a t-shirt. Again, this user group meeting is sponsored by Data-Driven Technologies. This is our nonprofit that funds SQL Server in Los Angeles, as well as Los Angeles Data Platform user group meetings. And today we have a session by Thimantha okay, the last name is going to be hard for me to pronounce, Vidanagamage. Hopefully I pronounced it right. It's Azure Data Factory, no-code data preparation in modern data warehouse. Just in case, if you are looking for a job, we have a few jobs on our website. You can scan the QR code, or you can just go and click on the hyperlink. And we have a few jobs that you can submit yourself and see. You can submit a candidacy. And again, this is not affiliated with us. This is just us trying to connect the dots. And I think we can go back. And without further ado, let's go to our speaker, Thimantha. It's all yours. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much for the opportunity for me to speak at the Los Angeles Data Platform user group. So, and Steve, you pronounced my last name perfectly. I think well, that's exactly how you pronounce it. So thank you very much for that, Thimantha. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who has joined us from around the world, hopefully. And my session title is on Azure Data Factory no-code data preparation in a modern data warehouse. So let me share my screen so that we can get things further. Right. So I hope my screen is visible right now.
Yep, it's all good.
Right, nice. So the session title, as you guys might already know, is no-code data preparation in a modern data warehouse with Azure Data Factory. So this session is based on the Power Query feature in Azure Data Factory. I've been interested in the feature ever since it was released in into public preview in 2019, and I have been doing some R&D around it, and that's what inspired me to build this session for you guys, so that I can shed some light on for you guys to get things further as well. And there is also, but it's important to keep in mind that there is another technology, there is another feature in Azure Data Factory and Azure Synapse Analytics that's used for no-code data preparation or low-code data preparation, you can say. That's mapping data flows. So we'll not be covering on mapping data flows in this session. This session will be on the Power Query feature, the Azure Data Factory Power Query feature, and how you can integrate it into a modern data warehouse solution. And also this Power Query feature is only limited to Azure Data Factory at the moment. It's not available in Azure Synapse Analytics. So that's just a bit about that. And also in this session, what I'll be mainly doing is basically sharing my viewpoint in terms of where should you integrate Azure Data Factory, the Power Query feature in Azure Data Factory into a modern data warehouse solution. So I'm assuming that you guys have the basic knowledge in the modern data warehouse solutions, Azure Data Factory, and data ingestion with Azure Data Factory. If not, it's completely fine. I'll be covering up some basics in this session as well. So you guys should be able to take this further. And if things are still confusing for you guys, it's you're more than welcome to drop me a message or connect with me on LinkedIn and drop me a message, and I'm more than happy to help you guys out. So without further ado, let's just get things further. And if you guys don't know me, for those who don't know me, I'm Thimantha Vidanagamage. I love working with Microsoft Data Platform technologies such as Power BI, Azure Data Factory, and Azure Analyst Services. The most important thing out of all the details that you see in the screen right now is my Twitter handle at Thimantha. So please follow me on Twitter at Thimantha. Moving into the agenda for today, firstly, I will take you through the modern data warehouse and its architecture, and later on we'll look at data preparation in a modern data warehouse, and finally I'll be wrapping up this session by showing you guys how to engage in no-code data preparation in a modern data warehouse with the use of the Power Query feature in Azure Data Factory. Right. Moving into the basics of a modern data warehouse, firstly, it's important for us to know what is a modern data warehouse. So a modern data warehouse is a data platform that is specifically catering for analytical purposes. With a modern data warehouse, you can bring all types of data in. So these are structured, unstructured, and semi-structured data. And modern data warehouses are considered as highly scalable and flexible as well. So scalability is coming from all the scalable cloud components. So the Azure components that are Azure technologies that are used in the modern data warehouse. And the flexibility is coming from the data lake concept that's followed in the modern data warehouse. Right. Now it's time for us to look at the modern data warehouse architecture. So what you see in the screen right now is the modern data warehouse architecture. You can call this a reference architecture as well. So a reference architecture is an architecture which shows you how things work around, and it does not mean that you should use all the technologies that you see in the screen right now in this architecture. It might fit into your requirement or might not fit into your requirement as well. So it's entirely dependent on what kind of a business requirement that you're dealing with. So that's a bit about that. And you can see that in this particular modern data warehouse architecture, the key components: ingest, store, prep and train, model, and serve. So basically, just to brief you through this architecture, firstly, data is ingested from multiple data sources, and the ingested data is stored in an Azure data lake. And afterwards, the data is prepped uh, and transformed and loaded into Azure Synapse Analytics or a data warehouse. And from there, basically you have a data model or a semantic model, and the semantic model is concerned by reports, and also the semantic model caters self-service BI requirements. So that's just a bit about how this architecture is going. And it's important to keep in mind that this is actually according to the Microsoft documentation, this is actually an outdated modern data warehouse architecture, we can say. The updated one is entirely based on Azure Synapse Analytics, and we can call that a data lakehouse as well, which is a different concept compared to a modern data warehouse. So that's just a bit about that. So if you just navigate through the Microsoft documentations, you would not see this architecture anymore. But this did exist as a modern data warehouse architecture in the past. Right now, you would see this. You would see an architecture as an enterprise data warehouse architecture, which is entirely based on Azure Synapse Analytics, and which is identical, and which we can call it as a data lakehouse. So that's just a bit about that. And the reason why I thought of going with this outdated version, or the version that does not exist with the Microsoft documentations now, is because I felt that you guys might get things confused with Azure Synapse Analytics. And since we are, this session is all about a Power Query feature in ADF, I just wanted to stick with the usual technologies without going into the architecture that's entirely based on Azure Synapse Analytics. So that's just a bit about that and the architecture around that we'll be working on. And with all these components, our main focus in this session would be these two specific components. These are the storage, data storage in Azure Data Lake, and also the data preparation component, or prep and train. So these are the two components that we'll be focusing on this session in order for data storage and for data preparation. Right. Okay. Now, since we have a better understanding of a modern data warehouse, it's important for us to know what data preparation is all about. Right. Now, data extracted from multiple data sources might not be prepared for analytical purposes. So it's important for us to prepare that data for analytical purposes. So there are two key tasks involved in this data preparation process, which is data cleansing and data transformations. So data cleansing is all about just cleaning up the data, and data transformation is all about just changing the structure of the data to an optimized way for analytical purposes. And this would engaging in data preparation or engaging in data cleansing and data transformations would improve the data quality and accuracy. For example, a data cleansing task would be replacing the null values with some meaningful value, right? That would obviously improve the data quality of data and data accuracy for a certain extent as well. A data transformation task can be joining two tables or merging two tables to fit in a specific analytical requirement. And that would obviously increase the data quality and accuracy as well, dependent on the tables you will be joining, right? Or merging. So that's just a bit about data preparation for you. And now we have an understanding on the modern data warehouse and the data preparation. And it's time for us to look at the feature itself, Azure Data Factory Power Query feature. Going back to the history of the Power Query feature in Azure Data Factory, firstly, it was introduced to, it was released to public preview as Running Data Flows. It came out actually as two types of data flows in Azure Data Factory, mapping data flows and running data flows. Then later on, Microsoft moved renamed it to Power Query, Azure Data Factory Power Query, and moved it into a separate location. So that's just a bit about the feature, and it has been in public preview since 2019 November, I guess, and it came out of public preview in 2021 October. So just to give you a brief about this, I had presented this session in some other summits and in some other conferences and user groups as well when it was still in public preview. So this is the first time I'm presenting this session when this feature was out of public preview, which is when this feature is generally available. So that's just a bit about that. And this feature is actually Power Query in Azure Data Factory is basically code-free or no-code data preparation. That's the main advantage of using Power Query, right? The Power Query in Azure Data Factory feature. So in Azure Data Factory feature. So in this case, you don't need to code for data preparation. That functionality is entirely catered by the Power Query in Azure Data Factory. In other words, you don't need to know Python, PySpark, or even SQL for data preparation. You just need to know the usual Power Query that you guys might have used in Power BI and even Excel back in time. So that's all you need to know in order to work with the Power Query feature in Azure Data Factory. This Power Query feature, basically whatever the Power Query you write, or whatever the M language that Power Query that you use in for any kind of data cleansing or data transformation is translated to Spark code. So that's actually another key advantage of the Power Query feature in Azure Data Factory, and something that a lot of people are fascinated about, because what you basically, if you guys don't know what Spark is, Spark basically facilitates big data workloads and is a unified engine for large-scale data processing. So basically, just to give you a brief on that, by converting or by translating the M language or the Power Query that you use in Azure Data Factory to Spark code, what that does is it improves the compatibility for big data processing and to manage big data workloads. And that's really a massive advantage of this translation. And another key point to keep in mind regarding this the Power Query feature in Azure Data Factory is that it has most of the features in Azure Data Factory. You can run the Power Query feature in Azure Data Factory as a pipeline activity as well. So basically, you can drag and drop the feature in to your pipeline, and you can just execute the pipeline and your data preparation task would work on according to the Power Query that's being used. So that's just a bit about that, and I hope you got a better understanding of the feature right now. And if you don't get what this is all about, it's completely fine. We'll be going through a couple of demos, and you would be able to understand how this works out. Right. Now, I have been previously, I walked you through the modern data warehouse reference architecture, right? So in this particular architecture, which I took you guys through, if you take your attention to this particular section, you can see that Databricks is suggested as the default technology, right, in the reference architecture. So what we'll be doing is basically in the modern data warehouse solutions, basically if you want to use a Power Query feature, we'll be using the Power Query feature instead of the Databricks feature. Databricks technology, and that's demonstrated in the screen right now. So that's how we'll be going about things, and that's how we'll be integrating the Power Query feature in Azure Data Factory into modern data warehouse solution. So just to brief you take you through a detailed view on how this works, let's quickly see how that works out. Instead, let's see, let's just have a detailed understanding in terms of how Azure Databricks replaces the Power Query feature in Azure Data Factory.
Thimantha?
Yeah.
Quick question.
Yes,
this is probably not going to be related on the session, but one of the attendees is asking if you aware of any open source projects that he or she can volunteer.
Unfortunately not. I'm really sorry about that. But
okay.
Let me look into that. Open source projects in terms of data engineering, or is it data analytics? I would like to have a bit
data
of
science.
insight so that. Data science. So I'll have a look at that, because I'm actually I have been working with a lot of Microsoft and Azure technologies. So not really very much into open source, but I'm more than happy to help out with that. So let me have a look at that and see if I can get something in. Right.
Thank you. Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Right.
I think you muted yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No
sorry
problem
about that. Right. Okay. So now let's get back into and let's see how the Azure Databricks that's suggested in the reference architecture in the screen right now. How does it replace the Power Query feature in Azure Data Factory? So let's have a detailed view of in terms of how that works out. So firstly, you will have the data sources as usual, right? And basically, you will be engaging you will be performing data ingestion tasks, and you will be loading data into your Azure Data Lake Gen 2 row zone. Just keep the bird zone away for now, and I would explain that later on in this session. So later on in a moment. So basically, just think that it loads your data as is into Azure Data Lake Gen 2, and the data that is loaded is referred back by the Power Query feature in Azure Data Factory, and data preparation tasks are run through, and then the data is loaded back into another location called the Sage Zone in Azure Data Lake Gen 2, right? So if I just summarize that to you back again, you have the data sources, and basically you ingest the data into one particular area in the Azure Data Lake, which is called the row zone. And from the row zone, basically the data ingested into the row zone or that particular row area in the Azure Data Lake is referred to by the Power Query feature in Azure Data Factory, and data preparation tasks are run through with the Power Query feature. And after the data preparation tasks are carried out, the prepared data is loaded back into another location or another area in the Azure Data Lake, which is called the stage zone. So what are these zones that I just talked about? So zones are basically used to organize files in a data lake. So it's simply not just used in Azure Data Lake, it's used in any kind of data lake concept, the zones. So you have different types of zones, such as, so I have just used only the row zone and the stage zone at this stage. So the row zone is all about to capture raw data that is loaded, that is ingested as is from the respective sources. And the stage zone is to store the prepared data. So I have only focused on those two zones in this session, but there are also other zones like curated zone, user drop zone that we introduce or that we use depending on the client requirement for the data lake solution. So in this case, it's just row zone and stage zone because I just wanted to keep things simple as possible for you guys so that you guys can actually understand the concept and try and implement that. Try and integrate that into future solutions, right? And just something to keep in mind, so only structured data is considered in this particular implementation or whatever I'm going through right now. So unstructured data can be catered similarly as well with the functionalities that are available with Azure Data Factory. So this is how basically you go through the structure. Basically, even in the demos, I'll be focusing on the structured data, and the data source will be a structured data source, which is a very popular data source that you guys might already know, AdventureWorks. So I would be focusing on structured data because I personally feel that you guys are very much, the majority of you guys in this data field are very much familiar with structured data sources compared to unstructured or semi-structured data sources. So I thought of sticking to that so that you guys can get a better understanding, can easily grab the concept and use it as per your preference in the future solutions. So that's just a bit about that. And keeping that in mind, let's get back into our first demo, which is basically creating the Power Query with Azure Data Factory. So let's get back into our Azure Data Factory environment. Right. What you see now is my Azure Data Factory environment, and yeah, some of these tasks I wasn't really able to. These are some of the R&D that I did back in time. So let's just leave it as it is. And what we'll be interested in this session is the Power Query feature in Azure Data Factory, and basically how you use that feature or how you create a Power Query. Sorry, in Azure Data Factory is basically you will go to the Power Query option that you see right at the, and just to keep in mind that as you open Azure Data Factory, you would land on a screen like this. So in order to navigate yourself to the Power Query feature, you need to click on author or this the pencil icon that you see in the left-hand side of your screen. And when you click on author, you would be landing in the place where you got the Data Factory resources, activities, and all that. And what you want to do now is
Thimantha?
Yeah.
Quick question. So how do you even get to Azure Data Factory? I see that's not reachable from portal.azure.com. So is it adf.azure.com?
Not really. So how you usually access the Azure Data Factory feature is basically you just search for portal.azure.com.
Oh, okay. So it is from portal. Okay.
Right, and portal, and I would take you through that as well, so that anyone who does not understand can understand how that works out. So let's just give it a bit of time. Since we have ample of time, no problem in taking that through. So basically, you have portal.azure.com, azure.com, and you would see your environment right here. And if you are someone who is newly joining or someone who hadn't created a Azure Data Factory instance before, you can just do search for Azure Data Factory. Oh, that's very weird. So let me see. Okay, it says Data Factory. Sorry about that. And just click on Data Factories.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
And you can click on Create, and you
and
can
then you go
basically
to project probably.
You're right. And you
Okay.
can just create your environment, and you can go on from there. So that's basically how you go about that. And
thank you.
right, that's just a bit about that. Thank you. Thank you for your question. Thank you. Right. So that's just a bit of how you get yourself into the Azure Data Factory environment. And basically, when you create your instance, so when you access your Azure Data Factory environment, you ideally land here to this particular welcome screen. I guess it's the welcome, oh, we can say the home screen, home window. And you, in order to see the Power Query feature and Azure Data Factory, you need to navigate yourself to the author window. And in the author window, I'm sorry, in the author window, you can see in the author window, you can see the Power Query feature right at the bottom as an option. You can see data flows on top, data sets, pipeline on top, and you can create a new Power Query by clicking on the ellipsis and clicking on new Power Query, or you can create a new Power Query by clicking on the plus icon you see right under the factory resources search bar in factory resources, and you can navigate yourself to Power Query, and in Power Query you can do your magic with you would access to the Power Query environment, and you can do your thing there. And just a bit about that. So and just to give you an understanding on how this works, is similar to the mapping data flows feature or most of the other features. You would need to have an input, the data cleaning or data preparation features. So you will need to have an input data set to use for Power Query data transformations. And regarding input data sets, I have pre-created some input data sets here that I'll be using today, which is the Power Query feature, which is basically specifying to a very specific file. But moving further, you guys basically moving further, you can always you can use Azure Data Factory expressions like I have used for right here with parameters in order to create your data sets. No problem with that. And you can refer to the row zone in your Azure Data Lake, and you can refer to the respective file. And what should be ideally referring to in the data set for data transformations is the row zone. So just to show you what this row zone is all about, it's basically a folder, and I would take you through that folder by accessing to my Azure Data Lake Gen 2, which I had created for R&D purposes. And in that, basically you would have something called blob containers. And if you are someone new to Azure Data Lake Gen 2, you need to make sure that you add a container or create a new container first, and basically arrange your folders inside that particular container. And so the container that I'll be using at this stage is demo 1. And inside demo 1, you can see the row and state zones, which I talked about in the previous slide. And basically what we'll be referring to is data from this particular row zone, and we'll be doing the data preparations and loading it back to the state zone right here. So if we go to the row zone, what we'll be specifically referring to is one of the files from here, which is the territory package file, and I would be using that for my transformations. I would be using that for my data preparation, and I would be loading that back to the state zone you see right here. Master, and that's about it, and territory basically. And that's basically how you would be going about that. And regarding the folder hierarchy, there is no hard and fast rule for you to like go for this kind of a folder hierarchy with month, date, year, and so on. And with whatever it is, schema name or whatever it is, folder hierarchy is entirely up to you and for your business requirement in terms of how you want to organize your files, for what kind of a folder hierarchy you want to organize your files in. So in this case, I had just organized it this way because I just felt this would give you a better understanding in terms of what inspire you guys better in terms of how you should arrange the folder hierarchies as well. So in terms of row and state zones. So that's just a bit about that. And basically what as I told you previously, what we'll be doing is referring to a file in the row zone, as I am doing right here, which is PQ territory. And if you click on preview data, the file would turn up. And you should be able to see the data, and we'll be using this data. And we'll be just performing some very simple data preparation task, and we will be loading that back into the state zone. So that will be the ideal task. So regarding this, there are a few exceptions here. So most of you guys might be interested in creating a unified Power Query or Power Query for maybe a set of different data, so that it goes through with reference to the parameters and all that. But there is an exception with the Power Query feature for that. Is basically you cannot, so if you are going for a unified Power Query or a Power Query that is reusable for multiple data, such as, for example, customer data, product data, sales data, and so on. If you want to use the same Power Query for multiple types of to be reused for multiple types of data, you can't do that, because if you want to reuse the Power Query, you would need to have a data set without a schema, right? And well, that's entirely managed with the Azure Data Factory expressions and parameters and all that, right? Which is similar to the data set here, where you don't have a schema, but everything's managed here with the Azure Data Factory expressions and the parameters you see in the screen right now. So that is not really allowed with the Power Query feature in Azure Data Factory. So you would need to use data set with schema like you see in the screen right now in order to get your use the Power Query feature. So that's just a bit of exception. So basically, if you have you would need to have a data set each for each Power Query option that you use for each type of data, each table or each data each what can I say, each data domain or each data, each type of data that you have in your respective source. All right. Okay, so now let's get on with it and just create a Power Query. And how we create a Power Query is click on the plus icon that you see right on the top and just navigate yourself to Power Query, or you can create it from the bottom. So I would create it from right here. And here they ask for, sorry about that. And here they ask for a respective data set or input data set, which I talked about previously. So in this case, I would be referring to PQ territory. And after referring to PQ territory, I would also like to give a pretty decent name for this Power Query. I would say PQ territory demo. You can rename it from the sidebar that you see in the right-hand side of your screen. And basically, that would basically bring in your PQ territory data. Right. That would basically bring in your PQ territory data, and you can simply see that from right here. This is basically the PQ territory data that you saw on the Parquet file when I previewed the data. So we had just loaded it back to Power Query. And this is basically what you see in the screen now. Is a Power Query environment, and you can see that it's very similar to the Power Query environment that you guys might have used in Power BI and even Excel, right? You can see the same data transformation features, same features in the Power Query data or the Power Query window that you saw in Power BI, right? You can see it in the same home tab, transform, add column, and all that. So it's very similar to that. And just a bit about that in terms of how this looks like. And just to take you through this environment, so we have 3 types of views in this Power Query environment. So let me just make that a bit bigger, maybe. Yep. Basically, you have the diagram view, which just shows which source is it referring to, is the particular data set referring to, and basically the Power Query that you manipulate and work on for data preparation. And then you have the data view that we used to be previously. So the data view is basically a straight up table in terms of how your data looks like. And then you have the schema view. Let me just, I don't want the diagram view now. So this is the schema view, which just shows the schema of the data that you are preparing or that you are working with. And I would head myself back to the data view. And this is what the data view looks like, very identical to Power BI. And you can see that you have the same query settings that you have in Power BI in the right-hand side of your screen as well. And you can see the Power Query steps right here. Whatever the steps you engage in here can be seen here. And also we have some options in the Home tab, which are project options and global options. Global options are the settings that you set for basically global Power Query you write all throughout Azure Data Factory. Basically, it has some basic settings like default data view you would like, data view or schema view, or show enable step cost indicators, which shows like how much which steps are the most costliest and which steps should be paid attention to, kind of thing. So show scripting step call out and also enable column profiling. So column profiling, as you guys might know, with Power BI is all about, it gives you an insight of how the data looks like in terms of cleanliness and data quality and all that, with column quality features and all that. So that can be enabled as well. I would not be going to that level. So And there are type detection features, settings that you guys can go through, and parameter settings, data view settings, and so on. So that's just a bit about the global options. And then we have something called project options, which is um, uh, specific, as far as I know, to this particular data factory instance. Just two options right here. One option is basically automatically detect column types and headers for all structured sources. So we'll not be, as I told you previously, we'll not be working with unstructured sources at this stage. So we'll be going to structured data sources. So let's keep that away for a while. And we have a lot of combining data from multiple data sources, which is something that everyone, which is all about joining the data and working together with multiple data sources, appending the data, merging the data, and so on, to get the data sorted, prepared. Right. So that's just a bit about project options and global options for you. Then after that, something that's really crucial for you guys to understand is the user query. So user query basically defines a query to load to this basically defines the data or the query that's used to take your data through and load it to a respective data source. So that's the user query that has all the Power Query that you work with, and all the Power Query steps that you work with, and basically you can use that to use it against your raw data or refer to your raw data, and use this. You can use this Power Query, and you can engage in data preparation and load it back to the state zone, as I told you previously. And the ADF resource shows all the input data sources or the input data sets that are referred to in this particular Power Query. So in this case, we are just referring to PQ territory, so we are all cleared out there. So that's just a bit about that. Now, getting back into the Power Query itself, let's just play around this. So here I just want to make sure that I have two types of Power Query. One type of two queries at this stage, because I want to load the data set with, let's say, I want to load the data set with sales YTD, sales last year, cost YTD, cost last year, into a separate location. I want to load that data into a separate location. And I just want a data set as a dimension to a separate location without the sales figures and with just the group, country, region, name, and all that, right? So that's what I want to do. So I want two Power Queries to load to two different locations, so that they can be used for two different analytical purposes, right? So how you do that is basically duplicate the Power Query, and afterwards you can rename the Power Query. So I can say this territory query with, this is very similar to the query that very similar to what you guys might have worked with Power BI. So I would say territory query without cells. And the other one would be territory query with cells. I think it's possible. It's a territory query. I think this error is coming down from the advanced data Power Query. Let me just have a look at that. right, so just looking into where this is coming from. Okay, so seems like you need a query called user query. So what I would do is I would rename one of this to user query. And yeah, this should be fine. Let's see how this works out. Let me just delete this for now. That works okay, and let me just duplicate this. That works fine too, and let me just rename this now. I would maybe rename it to another name. That looks pretty much okay too. That was weird. I really don't know how that error came up. That now how did it affect both the queries? So either way, we had have our query sorted out now. And one query I just want to just take off all the columns, including the sales columns and the modified data and all that. So I would select those particular columns or attributes, and I would simply right click as with Power BI and all the tools, and just click on remove columns. And that would just remove the columns. The functionality is very similar to Power BI Power Query, so there is nothing new in that. So basically, if you guys are very comfortable with the Power Query that you guys use in Power BI, you guys should be comfortable with this as well. So in here, I would just remove the two Power Query, two unwanted fields that are used for configurations, which is row ID, and the other one is the modified date. So I would remove these two columns. Right, and we have two Power Queries, one with one with one without the sales figures and one with the sales figures. So that's about it for data preparation task. I just didn't want to complicate you guys. I think you guys already know how to prepare data with the Power Query feature in Power BI, so it's very similar to that in terms of all ends. So you guys should be comfortable with that. So I'm not going to complicate you overly with that. And basically that's about it. And what we do now is we save the query. And we would we call it here with it here, and we'll just publish this particular new Power Query that we created. So usually in solutions, you guys should have a Git repository or a GitHub repository or any kind of source control in Azure, in an Azure Data Factory environment or in an Azure Synapse environment. But at this stage, since this is just a demo environment, I haven't set up any of that. That's why it goes on to publish this way, but usually you have a separate branch structure and a separate set of best practices that you guys should go to in order to publish this to the main branch or for the data factory live instance or for the live or for the data factory that triggers in live. So that's just a bit about that. So we have our Power Query ready, and that's Power Query territory demo, and we had created that. And the next demo that takes us to our next demo, which is configuring the Power Query activity. Right. Now that we have created the Power Query in this particular environment, so you can see that in the screen right now. So let's just close that. What you want to do is you want to create a pipeline and to configure the respective pipeline activity, right? So how you create a pipeline, I don't think I should take you guys through this, but how you create a pipeline is just click on the ellipsis icon and right in front of the pipeline and click on new pipeline, or you can click on the plus icon you see on top, right under the factory resources, factory resources search bar, and you can click on new pipeline, and that would create you a new pipeline. So you can give a nice pipeline name as well. So I would give that prepare territory demo. I want to do is I want to use the Power Query activity, and I want to configure the Power Query activity into this pipeline, right? So how you do that is just search for Power Query in the activity search bar, and you would see a Power Query option that would pop up. Just drag and drop it into your pipeline and just give a better name for that as well. I would say that Power Query, Power Query. And then I would get myself into, so you can give rename the Power Query activity as same with all the other activities that you rename. Just click on the activity, go to general, and you can rename it right there. And in this particular Power Query activity, let's navigate ourselves to the settings options, settings tab. And under the settings tab, you should select the Power Query that you want to work yourself with. So I want to go on with the Power Query demo, which is the Power Query that we created. So basically, you are referring to the Power Query that you created to your respective pipeline as an activity so that it can be executed with the pipeline. And then you have the compute type and the compute options that you would want to go with. I would go with the general purpose compute type, and for that, this is about the Spark configurations that we need to use in order to execute our respective Power Query. So we just use general purpose compute type for this, and this is basically the number of cores that you want to use for your Spark instance in order to get this execution up and going. So I would just go with 4 cores at this stage, but you can go up to 256 cores as per your necessity. So 4 cores would be enough at this stage. And staging is all about if you are dealing with Azure Synapse Analytics. So in this case, we are not, so we'll just ignore this. So this is all about just creating a specific staging environment with a staging folder and a staging link service with reference to Azure Synapse Analytics. So that's just a bit about that. And that's about configurations for us. And if we get ourselves to the sync option, you can see both our Power Queries, right? One Power Query with the sales figures and the other Power Query without the sales figures. And I do not have 2 separate data sets created for this particular purpose. So what I'll be doing is I'll be just staging them into the same data set or the same folder environment as 2 different files. So what this would do is it could just take your data through the Power Query, and basically one file, one specific file will be generated in your Azure Data Exchange environment with this particular query with the sales figures, and another particular file in your Azure Data Lake state zone will be created without the sales figures, territory sales figures as per your requirement. So that's basically it about the configurations, and I wouldn't be executing this because the last time I executed this, it took me quite a while, and we might have to wait a while to execute this if you are going with execution. So not going to execute this, but yeah, that's basically how you configure your pipeline activity, a Power Query pipeline activity to run the Power Query as a pipeline. And that's just a bit about that. And finally, I have some demos, some showcase some other scenarios that I had worked on that I just created just to show you different perspectives how data preparation is done with Power Query as well. Not drastically different, but these are scenarios that are that can be easily understood, for as data preparation tasks. So yeah, let's have a look at that as well. So let's get back into our Power Query environment. So let's get back into our Azure Data Factory environment. And in our Azure Data Factory environment, you can see that I had created previous Power Query on PQ customers. So let's just navigate ourselves to PQ customers customer and see how that's being done. Right. Okay, so it's same as usual, but a bit more. You can see a bit more of Power Query steps here. So one step is to merge queries. So if you go to the ADF resource, you can see that it's referring to two different input data sources, and it's merged into one with the use of the merge queries Power Query functionality. And basically you join these two tables, PQ person and PQ customer, into one with the use of this merge query step. With this merge query step, so you basically join in the person ID and I think business entity ID. So yeah, so you can see the entire Power Query steps here as well. So here you can see I had joined the person ID and the business entity ID. And the next thing I had done is I had expanded on the person. So when you join in the join person, you have to expand on, basically you have to expand the columns that you want to see additionally from the respective person table. So I had expanded on that here. And after that, I had removed all the unnecessary columns in the next step. So basically that's quite a lot. And I had just, you can see the entire list. If you go to advanced editor, you can see I have taken off row ID, modified date, person ID, show ID, and territory ID. I had just taken those off. And from the previous expansion step of the PQ person or the person entity, I had just brought in the first name, last name, and the email promotion. And that's basically how I have gone about the data preparation for this particular customer entity. So just to simplify, once again, I had brought in two input data sets at this stage. One data set is PQ customer, which is referring to the customer entity, or basically the custom table. And the other entity, other data set is PQ person, which is referring to the person table. And basically you join these two tables and basically remove some unwanted columns and bring in the necessary columns, and basically do the engage in the data preparation that way. So that's how I went about PQ customer. And if we move ourselves into a bit of an advanced scenario, so PQ sales is all about managing transaction data. So For PQ cells, I had used once again two data sets. One data set which is the order header table, and the other table is the order detail table. I think if you guys have worked with almost any kind of domain, you guys are very familiar with these header tables and line item tables or detail tables. Basically, these two work together, and I think you guys are very much familiar with that. So that's basically how these two tables, basically those two data sets are brought in. And what I do is I use Power Query once again. And firstly, I merge these two particular data sets, which are by the sales order ID. I merge the PQ order detail with PQ order header with the PQ order detail. And next, I just expand on whatever the columns that I want from the PQ order detail. So at this stage, I just, I had just brought in quite a lot. So sales order detail ID, order quantity, product ID, line total, and so on. So I had brought in those columns from the order detail table after joining. And afterwards, what I had done is I had removed the unnecessary columns. So if we look at the removed unnecessary columns, there is quite a lot. Once again, revision number, salesperson ID, and so on, so on. And afterwards, I had just reordered the columns just to make it look a bit more organized in terms of data preparation. So I had worked on that, and I had also replaced certain values. So as you can see, there has been a null value, and I had just replaced it with -1 just to make it look nice and just to make it at least a bit more meaningful for currency rate ID.
Thimantha?
So yes, Steve.
Quick question. I see that this is the same Power Query language that is in Power BI. How do you choose between Power BI and ADF?
Right. ADF is used for large-scale implementations. So, for example, modern data warehouse implementations, or even any implementation that is typically large-scale and that has multiple data sources, at least that have, and that might have big data involved in it. And basically, Power Query is a different story. It's typically, Power BI is actually a different story, and it's catering for different requirements. Not that you can't do whatever you can do with Power Query, ADF with Power Query, Power BI as well. You can do those tasks in Power BI, specifically with the Power BI data flows and all that. But definitely you need something like Power BI Premium there in order to get it working. But basically, if what I can say is that if your implementation is a small scale implementation, you don't need to go for a modern data warehouse architecture, or you don't need to go for Azure Data Factory, right? You would probably be able to manage that with Power BI, but that entirely depends on the kind of client requirement or business requirement that you have to manage with. So is that clear enough?
Yeah, so I'm guessing you would go for ADF if you need more heavy lifting and you have resources and people to support it.
Exactly, heavy lifting, and maybe basically if you need to depending on the requirement, if your implementation would be a large scale implementation, and basically if you need multiple types of data in, and if you need to manage big data and all, you need to manage a heavy workload, as you said, you need to go for Azure Data Factory or Azure Synapse Analytics. So and that's another option as well. If that's not the case, you can stick with Power BI, but it's actually 50-50, I would say, because with Power BI premium capacity, there are a lot of capabilities that had come true as well for heavy lifting. So I can't specifically say that that Power BI is no longer catering scale implementations as well. It has that capability as well. But that's just a bit of idea in terms of that. But definitely small scale implementations should probably be managed with or small workloads or basically small workloads can be managed with just Power BI most of the time. So that's just a bit about right. Okay, so so I just took you through the Power Query steps, and then what I did was I replaced the value of null into -1, and finally what I did was I just renamed the columns, some of the columns, just to make it look a bit more user friendly for the end users. Because keep in mind that this particular data lake when you stage the data, this particular data that you stage will be accessed by your data analyst and data scientist for their purposes as well. So it should ideally make sure that it's comforting for them. The data should be comforting for them as well, right? So that's just a bit of thought into that, and basically that's about it. And those are the some of the those are the scenarios that I just wanted to show you guys. So that actually pretty much concludes my session today. So once again, thank you very much for all the attendees for attending my session, and thank you very much for Steve and the team for having me in for this session. And I hope you guys got something out of this session. Please feel free to just scan through the QR code you see in the screen right now and just provide me with valuable feedback. And you can always connect with me on LinkedIn for any questions or anything. And please follow me on Twitter as well. So if there are any questions any further, you can simply drop that by, and I'm more than happy to answer. That's about it, actually.
Thank you. That was quite a session on ADF plus in general Azure.